Flashback, October 14, 1943. Somewhere over Bavaria, pilot Mort Harris grips the control yoke of Able Mabel, his B-17 Flying Fortress. Around him, 289 other bombers drone through the thin air at 24,000 feet, bound for the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. The target sits deep in the heart of Germany, 6 hours there and back, the longest, most dangerous mission the 8th Air Force has ever flown. Harris glances at the formation around him. Hundreds of aircraft perfectly spaced, their aluminum skins glinting in the morning sun. The most powerful air armada ever assembled. But something's wrong. Thunderbolts, turning back, his co-pilot calls out. Through the windscreen, Harris watches their P-47 escort waggle their wings in farewell. One by one, the stubby fighters peel away, heading west toward England. Their fuel tanks are empty. They've reached the limit of their range. The bombers continue alone. The German border passes beneath them. Then, the sky erupts. They come in waves. Focke-Wulf U-190s, the latest and deadliest German fighters, their squared wings and reptilian fuselages unmistakable. Messerschmitt Me-109s diving from above. Twin-engine Junkers Ju-88s, firing rockets that explode in bursts 4 times larger than anti-aircraft shells. 300 German fighters have been scrambled to defend Schweinfurt. The slaughter begins. A fortress to Harris' right takes a direct hit. The entire nose section disintegrates in an orange flash. The plane flips over, spiraling down, trailing black smoke. Harris counts the parachutes. 3. Only 3 out of 10 men. Another fort explodes. Then, another. Bandits 12 o'clock level. His navigator screams. Harris pushes the yoke forward, diving. The formation breaks apart as pilots take evasive action. But there's nowhere to hide at 24,000 feet. A Focke-Wulf screams past, so close Harris can see the pilot's face. The Germans' guns flash. Tracers stream past the windscreen. Metal tears. The aircraft shudders. Engine 2 is hit, the flight engineer shouts. Oil pressure dropping. Harris feathers the propeller, shutting down the damaged engine. Able Mabel lurches, fighting him. 3 engines now instead of 4. The formation struggles toward the target. Bombs away. Then the long flight home. By the time they reach England, the formation has been decimated. Of 229 fortresses that reached Schweinfurt, 60 were shot down. Another 17 crashed or were abandoned on the return flight. 77 bombers lost. 642 men dead. A 26% loss rate. Harris lands at dusk, his hands shaking on the controls. Trees at the end of the runway rush up to meet him. He clears them by feet. That night, walking through the barracks, he sees the empty bunks. Hears the silence where there should be voices. The next morning, a bulletin is posted. The 8th Air Force is suspending deep penetration raids into Germany. Indefinitely. Tirades talk among the crews. Quiet talk. About refusing to fly. About the impossibility of surviving a tour of 25 missions when a quarter of all aircraft are being shot down. The word spreads through the airbases of East Anglia like smoke. Mutiny. October 14, 1943 becomes known as Black Thursday. At this rate, the Allies would lose the air war within months. Autumn, 1943. Across the Reich. In their ready rooms and operations centers, German fighter pilots are relaxed, confident. Some are almost bored. They own the sky. The Focke-Wulf Fep-U-190, unveiled in 1941, outclasses every Allied fighter in Europe. Faster than the Spitfire in a climb. More stable in a dive. Armed with up to 4 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns. The German pilots call it Der Würger, the butcher bird. And it lives up to the name. At altitudes above 20,000 feet, where the American bombers fly their missions, the Feb-U-190 is supreme. Even the legendary Spitfire hero of the Battle of Britain cannot match it. As British ace Douglas Bader, who flew without legs, puts it, the plane certainly gave the British a shock. It outclimbed and outdived the Spitfire. Now for the first time the Germans were outflying our pilots. The Messerschmitt Me 109, backbone of the Luftwaffe since before the war, remains a formidable weapon. Top speed 386 miles per hour. Service ceiling 39,000 feet. Armed with one 20mm cannon through the propeller hub and 2 machine guns. Together the FUB U-190 and Me 109 form a nearly unstoppable combination. German pilots have seen it all. They've watched the American daylight bombing campaign sputter and fail. They've seen the P-47 Thunderbolts, heavy powerful fighters that nonetheless must turn back at the German border when their fuel runs out. They've seen the twin-engine P-38 Lightnings plagued by engine problems in the cold European skies, freezing up at high altitude. And they've seen the early model Mustangs. The P-51A with its Allison engine is fast at low altitude, good for reconnaissance, adequate for ground attack and strafing runs. But above 25,000 feet, where the real war is fought, where the bombers fly and die, the Allison Mustang is useless. Its power drops off dramatically. It becomes sluggish, difficult to handle. The RAF has relegated it to support roles. The Americans barely use it at all. German intelligence reports dismiss it. Captured examples are tested and found wanting. Some Luftwaffe pilots call it the American mistake. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, chief of the Germans, are winning the air war. They don't know that everything is about to change. September 1943. 8th Air Force Headquarters, England. General Ira Eaker sits alone in his office, staring at casualty reports. The numbers are devastating. Over Bremen, heavy losses. Over Anklam, heavy losses. Over Münster, catastrophic. Over Stuttgart, Marienburg, and twice over Schweinfurt, a bloodbath. In 1 week in October, the 8th Air Force lost 100 bombers, 1,000 crewmen killed or captured. The math is simple and brutal. If losses continue at this rate, every bomber crew will be dead before completing even 5 missions. The official tour is 25 missions. It's statistically impossible. The doctrine that brought them here, the bomber will always get through, has proven catastrophically wrong. The B-17 Flying Fortress, designed to defend itself with 12 .50 caliber machine guns, cannot survive without fighter escort. And the fighters they have, the P-47 and P-38, simply don't have the range to escort the bombers deep into Germany. Eaker picks up his pen and begins another letter to his boss, General Henry Hap Arnold, in Washington. It's a letter Hes written a dozen times in different forms. A plea for more aircraft, for better fighters, for longer range. Arnold's responses are terse, often accusatory. He thinks Eaker lacks will, lacks toughness, but Eaker doesn't lack will. He lacks planes. The bomber crews know it. Walking through any bomber base in England, you see it in their faces. The 1,000-yard stare, the quiet acceptance of death. Bomber bases, as one journalist writes, are damn depressing places. Death was always in the air, even though the guys were trying hard to laugh and forget. The psychological toll is as devastating as the physical casualties. Army Air Force's doctors report that pilots and crew are suffering stresses never before encountered in warfare. Frostbite at 40 below zero. Oxygen deprivation. The constant thunder of engines. The horror of watching friends' aircraft explode, of counting parachutes, and always counting too few. Some men simply break, refuse to fly. The air war in Europe is failing. What Eaker doesn't know, what almost no one in the American High Command knows, is that the solution already exists. It's sitting in a hangar in England, largely ignored. and it was born from one phone call 18 months earlier. Spring, 1940, Los Angeles, California. Dutch Kindleberger, president of North American Aviation, strides into his design office. "Ed," he says to his chief designer, Edgar Schmude, "I need to ask you something." Edgar Schmude looks up from his drafting table. As 44 years old, a German immigrant who came to America chasing the dream of flight. His path here was not easy. Born in Landsberg, Germany, he grew up building model airplanes, sketching fighters, dreaming of the sky. He worked for Fokker, then came to America in 1925. Lost his wife Louisa in a terrible car accident just as they arrived in California in 1935. He buried his grief in work, in the clean lines of aircraft design, in the mathematics of lift and drag and thrust. Now Kindleberger has a question. The British need fighters, desperately. The Battle of Britain is raging. They want 400 P-40s from Curtiss-Wright, but the production line is saturated. The British Purchasing Commission, led by Sir Henry Self, has turned to North American. Can they build P-40s under license? Well, Dutch Schmude replies, "Don't let us build an obsolete airplane. Let's build a new one. We can design a better one and build a better one. It's the spark that ignites the P-51 Mustang." Kindleberger loves the answer. "Ed, I'm going to England in about 2 weeks, and I need an inboard profile, 3-view drawing performance estimate, weight estimate specifications, and some detailed drawings on the gun installation to take along." Schmude smiles. "I can do that." He opens his desk drawer and pulls out a set of drawings. Has been designing his perfect fighter for years, sketching it in his spare time, refining it. The cockpit layout, the engine placement, the gun arrangements, the wing design. It's all there waiting, over the next 102 days, working at a pace that would be considered impossible today. Schmude and his team bring the NA-73X to life. The design is revolutionary. Instead of the tubular elliptical fuselage common to fighters of the era, Schmude creates rounded, almost oval lines. The nose narrows to a thin point. The cockpit is long and sculpted, a glass bubble that blends seamlessly into the fuselage. Below the belly between the wings sits a huge air intake, giving the plane a dangerous underslung look. Most striking is the wing. Schmude designs a laminar flow airfoil, a wing shape that minimizes drag by keeping air flowing smoothly across the surface. It's cutting-edge aerodynamics pushing the boundaries of what's possible. October 26, 1940. The NA-73X takes its first flight. Test pilot Vance Breese takes it up over the California desert. He stays aloft for just a few minutes. A cautious first flight. But he lands with a smile. "She flies like a dream," he reports. The British are impressed. They order production models. The Royal Air Force names it the Mustang. By October 1941, the first production Mustangs arrive in England. They cross the Atlantic in convoy, crated in the holds of cargo ships dodging U-boat wolf packs. At least 20 Mustangs are lost when ships are torpedoed in the frigid North Atlantic. Those that survive are assembled at British airfields and flown by RAF pilots. The reviews are ecstatic. Faster than a Spitfire up to 25,000 feet. Superior handling. 3 times the Spitfire's range. Up to 4 hours of flight time. The finest American fighter aircraft yet to reach England. But there's a problem. The Allison engine, built in America, performs beautifully at low altitude. But at high altitude, its power falls off dramatically. Above 25,000 feet, where bomber escort is needed, the Mustang becomes a different aircraft. Slower, less maneuverable, unable to compete with the FEP-U-190 or Me-109. Testing at the RAF's Airfighter Development Unit in Duxford confirms it. At altitude, the P-51A is not a frontline fighter, so the RAF assigns the Mustang to tactical roles: reconnaissance, ground attack, strafing. It's perfect for photographing German positions in France, fitted with a K-24 camera behind the pilot. It's excellent for low-level missions against fortifications and supply lines. But high-altitude combat? Impossible. The Mustang languishes in the shadows. And also ran. A promising design crippled by an inadequate engine. German pilots who encounter it at low altitude respect its speed, but they know its weakness. Above 25,000 feet, the Allison Mustang is no threat. Some call it another Allied failure. And there the story would have ended. The P-51 would have been a footnote. A good reconnaissance plane, nothing more. But then in the summer of 1941, something changes the equation. Summer 1941. Over the French coast. RAF pilots return from patrol with sketches. They've seen a new German fighter. A blunt-nosed aircraft with squared wings and a tapered fuselage. Black Nazi crosses on the wings and tail. At first, RAF Fighter Command thinks it might be a captured American P-36. But intelligence soon confirms the truth: the Germans have unveiled a new weapon. The Focke-Wulf Fu-190. Within weeks, the new fighter begins inflicting heavy casualties on RAF squadrons. It's faster than the Me-109 in a climb. More stable in a vertical dive. Faster and more agile than the Spitfire Mark V. Excellent visibility. Heavy armament. A formidable opponent. Then in June 1942, the RAF gets a gift. Oberleutnant Armin Faber, disoriented after a dogfight over the Channel, spots what he thinks is a Luftwaffe airfield on the Cotentin Peninsula. He lands. It's RAF Pembrey in Wales. A mechanic jumps on his wing and points a pistol at his head. Faber's captured Fu-190 is a windfall. The British quickly dismantle and analyze it. Then they reassemble the aircraft and fly it to the Air Fighter Development Unit in Duxford for testing. The results confirm their worst nightmare. The Fu-190 is superior to every Allied fighter in service. It has greater firepower and maneuverability than the Me-109. It outperforms the Spitfire Mark V in almost every category. For more than a year, it will maintain superiority over all Allied fighters. Behind sandbag barricades at the Air Ministry in London, staff officers dread each passing month. They must find a new fighter to match the Butcher Bird. No one thinks of the Mustang. It sits forgotten, relegated to reconnaissance and ground attack. And there it would have stayed. Except for one phone call. April 1942. RAF Duxford. Wing Commander Ian Campbell Orda hangs up the telephone and checks his watch. Hess just flown the P-51A for the first time. Intrigued by its maneuverability and speed at low altitude, Hess had an idea. A hunch. Hess called a test pilot he knows at Rolls-Royce, the engine maker for so many RAF aircraft. Asked him to come up right away and fly the American plane. The test pilot is Ronnie Harker. Harker arrives the next day, April 30, 1947, and worked his way up to become the company's first test pilot. Hess flown every major RAF aircraft, evaluating engine performance, troubleshooting problems. He knows engines the way a concert pianist knows their instrument. And looking at this American fighter, he sees potential. The Mustang is beautiful, sleek, modern, with clean aerodynamic lines. The cockpit visibility is excellent, far better than the Spitfire. The controls are well balanced. Harker climbs into the cockpit, settles into the seat, familiarizes himself with the instruments. He starts the Allison engine. It roars to life, smooth and powerful. He takes off. For 30 minutes, Harker throws the Mustang around the sky. Dives, climbs, rolls, turns. He pushes it to its limits, testing its handling characteristics, feeling how it responds. At low altitude, it's magnificent. Fast, nimble, responsive. The control harmony is nearly perfect. But as he climbs higher, he feels the change. Above 20,000 feet, the Allison engine begins to lose power. At 25,000 feet, it's struggling. The aircraft becomes sluggish. Harker lands, his mind racing. In the debriefing room, he writes his report. His hand moves quickly across the paper. The Mustang, he writes, closely resembles the Messerschmitt 109F in performance at low altitude. The airframe is excellent, possibly the best has ever flown. But the Allison engine is holding it back. Then he writes the sentence that will change the war. With a Merlin 61 engine, this aircraft ought to prove much faster than the 109F and the Spitfire V. He includes performance estimates. Ray Challier, a Rolls-Royce engineer, has run the calculations. With the supercharged Merlin 61, the same engine powering the latest Spitfire, the Mustang's top speed would leap from 390 mph to 441 mph at 25,600 feet, 41 mph faster, and the Merlin would maintain its power at altitude where the Allison dies. The Mustang would become a completely different aircraft. A high-altitude interceptor, a bomber escort, the fastest, longest-range fighter in the world. But there's a problem. The Air Ministry wants every available Merlin 61 for the new Spitfire 9. They're desperate to counter the FW-190. Trey's enormous skepticism about diverting scarce engines to an experimental conversion of an American aircraft that's already been written off as inadequate. Harker doesn't give up. He takes his case to his boss, Ernest Hives, managing director of Rolls-Royce. With all the enthusiasm and conviction I could muster, he later recalls, I told him what a splendid aircraft the Mustang was, and how it was needed by the RAF. Hives listens. Then he picks up the telephone and calls Air Chief Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman, Vice Chief of the Air Staff. Freeman is the ideal ally. Involved in the development of virtually every RAF aircraft between the wars, he understands the importance of testing and adaptation. He has the power to make things happen. When Hives asks for 3 Mustangs for conversion, Freeman authorizes 6. When Hives wants 250 sets of conversion parts, Freeman finds him 500. The project moves forward. August 1942. Rolls-Royce facility, Hucknall. The first Allison Mustang arrives for conversion. The engineering team faces a delicate task. They must remove the American Allison engine and install the British Merlin 61 without compromising the aircraft's structure or performance. It's surgery in aluminum and magnesium. The crew has one advantage: by sheer luck, the Allison and Merlin engines are almost identical in size. The distance from the firewall, the rear mounting for the engine, to the forward engine mount is nearly the same. But the Merlin is 290 pounds heavier. The engineers must recalculate the aircraft's center of gravity, adjust the mounting points, redesign the cooling systems. The Merlin 61 is a masterpiece of engineering. 14,000 separate parts. A 2-stage supercharger that maintains power at high altitude. Output 490 horsepower compared to the Allison's 185. But it runs hot. Very hot. The team works through the problem methodically. They enlarge the radiator intake under the fuselage, adjust coolant flow, modify the intercooler. Still, the engine overheats. The solution comes from an unexpected source. The U.S. Bureau of Standards suggests coating the radiator with keg liner, a lacquer used on the inside of beer cans to isolate beer from metal. It works. October 13, 1942. Test pilot Bob Chilton climbs into the converted Mustang. He starts the Merlin engine, runs through his checks, and takes off. 45 minutes later, the engine overheats and seizes. The team goes back to work. More adjustments to the cooling system. More testing. December 4, 1942. Chilton tries again. This time, the aircraft performs perfectly. He climbs through the clouds, banks, barrel rolls, soars, and dives over Southern California. The Merlin runs cool and smooth, delivering power that the Allison could never match. At 25,000 feet, the aircraft is still accelerating. A bold new breed came alive under his hands, one historian will later write. The P-51B, B for the new engine, has been born. The transformation is complete. The underpowered reconnaissance plane has become a high-altitude predator. Speed 420-27 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, faster than any fighter in service. Range, with drop tanks over 2,000 miles, farther than any fighter has ever flown. Performance outclimbs the FW-190 and Me-109 above 20,000 feet. Outdives both. Turns tighter than the Me-109. Armament: 650 caliber machine guns with 880 rounds of ammunition. It's a weapon that can change the war. But on the cusp of victory, the Merlin Mustang enters a wasteland of delay and neglect. Somehow, almost no one on the American side of the Atlantic seems interested. November 1942. The Pentagon, Washington, D.C. Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Hitchcock arrives rumpled and travel-weary from London. At 42 years old, Hitchcock is a legend. A World War I fighter pilot who was shot down behind German lines, escaped from a POW train, and walked back to Allied lines through Switzerland. After the war, he became the world's greatest polo player, a 10-goal handicap player, when there were only 5 in the world. Hez wealthy, connected, charismatic, but Hez restless. When war came again, he pulled strings to get back into uniform. Now Hez assistant air attaché at the American Embassy in London, writing reports on British aircraft for the Army Air Forces. And Hez become obsessed with the Mustang. Hez seen the performance data from the Merlin conversion. Hez flown a converted P-51 himself at Farnborough. He knows what it can do. Yesterday I had a good flight on a new fighter the English call the Mustang, he writes to his wife Peggy. It is made in California, by the North American Con. This is a great airplane, and very fast. Now Hez in Washington to make his case to the one man who can greenlight mass production, General Henry Hap Arnold, Chief of the Army Air Forces. The next morning, accompanied by Air Marshal Sir John Slessor of RAF Coastal Command and U.S. Brigadier General Alfred J. Lyon, Hitchcock calls on Arnold at the Pentagon. Arnold's office is a ring office in the massive 5-sided building that's just been completed in the mudflats along the Potomac. Hitchcock and his colleagues paper Arnold's walls with graphs and charts. They bombard him with data about the Mustang. They emphasize its speed advantages over German fighters. They tout its long-range capabilities. They explain the urgent need to escort bombers deep inside Germany. Arnold won't budge. Wright Field, the Army Air Forces Testing and Procurement Headquarters in Ohio, is satisfied with the Allison engine, he says. It's an American engine. Why would they want a British one? The P-51B is an experiment. A British experiment. Not proven like the P-47 Thunderbolt or P-38 Lightning already in production. Besides, Arnold continues, he needs hard numbers, flight test results, not estimates. The meeting ends in failure. Hitchcock returns to his sister-in-law's Georgetown townhouse that evening. His wife Peggy has flown down from New York to be with him. She says she's never seen him so depressed. He barely sleeps that night. But when morning comes, Hitchcock reassesses. The fight for the Mustang cannot fail. The Allied air war Hez certain will come to revolve around this aircraft. He decides he won't return to England. Not yet. He'll stay in America until February, taking his crusade for the Merlin Mustang around the country. The resistance Hitchcock faces is deeply rooted. Part of it is not invented here syndrome. The P-51 was ordered by the British not through normal American procurement channels. Many in the Army Air Forces believe that anything designed for the British must be inferior. As Tommy Hitchcock writes in a memo sired by the English out of an American mother, the Mustang has had no parent in the Army Air Corps to appreciate or push its good points. Peter's also anti-British prejudice. As presidential aide Harry Hopkins puts it, many Americans believed they naturally flew better than the British and always built better planes than the British. And there's wounded pride. The Allison engine was developed and paid for by the Army Air Forces. It's being used in the P-38, P-39 and early P-51s. Now the British want to replace it with the Merlin? It's an insult. American journalists have been trumpeting the Allison Mustang as a brilliant contribution of American technological genius. Swapping in a British engine undermines the narrative. The resistance goes all the way to the top. General Arnold is a true believer in the self-defending bomber. Hes staked his career on the doctrine that heavy bombers, the B-17 and B-24, can fight their way to any target without fighter escort. Their defensive armament, 1250 caliber machine guns, should be sufficient. Admitting that bombers need long-range fighter escort means admitting that his fundamental doctrine is wrong. Arnold isn't ready to make that admission. Not yet. December 1942. California and England. While Hitchcock crusades in America, the first flight tests of the Merlin Mustang yield hard performance numbers. Speed 427 miles per hour, at 25,000 feet. Confirmed. Rate of climb 200-300 feet per minute, faster than any American fighter. Range. With external tanks over 2,000 miles, the numbers are extraordinary. Robert A. Lovett, the Undersecretary of War for Air, and a civilian of enormous influence sees them. He strides down the hall to General Arnold's office. The Army Air Forces must go with the Merlin 61, he tells Arnold. They cannot waste time with the less powerful Allison engine. I remember insisting that we could not fool around with an inferior product when a superior one was available, Lovett later recalls. There was no question of what to do, really. Arnold still resists. But other forces are converging. Colonel Chesley Peterson, an American Eagle Squadron pilot, arrives at Wright Field to test fighters for the 8th Air Force. He asks to fly a Merlin Mustang. The general in charge refuses. The P-51 is not in the inventory. It is not in the terms of reference. A plane with a British engine will not be considered. Peterson demands to see Arnold. Arnold repeats what he told Hitchcock. The P-51 is finished. The production line has ended. You go back to England. Peterson is desolate. Then Prime Minister Winston Churchill weighs in. He writes to President Franklin Roosevelt asking him to see Hitchcock about the P-51 and feel they could use Rolls-Royce engines in them. Do you know anything about it? Can you give me a tip? Within hours, Arnold reverses course. He sends a memo to Wright Field asking how many P-51s should be built. The figure chosen 200 Mustangs. The logjam appears broken. But then nothing happens. December 1942. No production. January 1943. No production. Arnold has given the order, but he hasn't followed through. He doesn't make sure the factories start building. As Lovett later says, his hands were tied by his mouth. He said our only need was flying fortresses. Arnold still doesn't believe in the Mustang. Meanwhile in England, the first Merlin Mustangs assembled by Rolls-Royce are flying. The performance is everything Harker predicted. The plane is a revelation. But the Americans won't commit to mass production. Hitchcock continues his cross-country shuttle meeting with officials pressing the case. Slowly, grudgingly, attitudes begin to shift. In early 1943, Arnold finally authorizes full production. The factories in Los Angeles and Dallas begin tooling up. But it's slow. Agonizingly slow. March 1943. England. The unescorted bombing raids continue. Over Kiel, Hamburg, Hanover Castle, heavy losses. The 8th Air Force is hitting targets across Germany, but the price is staggering. In 6 days in July, they lose 100 bombers and 1,000 crewmen. General Arnold, under immense pressure in Washington, pushes General Eaker to keep sending bombers out. "My wire was sent to you to get you to toughen up," Arnold writes. He accuses Eaker of not sending enough bombers because of the fear of large losses. But Eaker doesn't lack will. He lacks escorts. August 17, 1943. Arnold orders the raid has been planning since March, a combined strike against the ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt and the Messerschmitt plant in Regensburg. 376 bombers set out in bad weather. 500 German fighters rise to meet them. 60 American bombers are shot down, a 16% loss rate. By now it's obvious the flying fortresses cannot survive over Germany without long-range fighter escort. In September, Arnold flies to England to see the problem firsthand. General Eaker puts together a mission to Stuttgart. 312 bombers. 45 don't return. A 15% casualty rate. Arnold watches them limp back to base. Watches the shattered aircraft, the dead and wounded being carried out. Hess beginning to understand. In October, the raids continue. Bremen, Vegesack, Marienberg, Anklam, Münster, all see heavy losses. The 100th Bomb Group, the Bloody 100th, loses 200 men, nearly half its complement. One historian later calculates that if losses had continued at this rate, the 8th Air Force would have to replace its entire fleet 2.5 times each year. Then comes the second Schweinfurt raid. October 14, 1943. East Anglia, England. The crews wake at 2:30 a.m. Breakfast is the same as always: dried eggs. Spam coffee toast with orange marmalade. Food that tastes like nothing, filling stomachs that are already tight with dread. Across East Anglia, 3,000 men drift toward briefing rooms. When the curtain is pulled back from the mission map, revealing the red string that marks their route, many of the pilots wince. The target is Schweinfurt. Again. They've been here before. August 17th. 36 B-17s from their group were shot down. Almost 20% of their planes. No one wants to go back. But orders are orders. 7 a.m. takeoff. The bombers lift off first before the fighters. The big B-17s need time to form up, assembling into their combat boxes, each plane positioned precisely relative to the others for mutual defense. Mort Harris, piloting Able Mabel with the 95th Bomb Group, goes through the routine. Get 4 engines running. Hold the brakes. Pull the stick back into your stomach. Shove the throttles all the way forward. Release the brakes. The fortress shoots forward like a rubber band. Trees at the end of the runway rush up. Harris pulls back. Able Mabel clears them by 200 feet. 290 bombers form up over England. Then they turn east toward Germany. The P-47 Thunderbolts escort them as far as they can. But over Aachen, the Thunderbolts reach their fuel limit. They waggle their wings in farewell and peel away. The bombers continue alone. The German fighters strike near Mainz. They come in waves. Focke-Wulf F-190s, Messerschmitt Me-109s, Junkers Ju-88s firing rockets. Major General Adolf Galland, commander of German fighter forces, has marshaled virtually the entire Luftwaffe strength to defend Schweinfurt. 300 fighters, 40 fighter bombers. The result is slaughter. One bomber crewman later recalls the landmarks of a nightmare, counting fortresses falling, cartwheeling down the sky, trying to count parachutes and rarely counting 10. 9 little yanks and a jerk loses 2 engines but keeps flying its pilot, fighting the controls. Cavalier takes a 20mm shell that explodes inside the fuselage. The radio operator, Technical Sergeant George Roberts, watches as gunners call in injuries. "Im hit. Im hit," one screams. Roberts says a mission prayer. Aboard Able Mabel, Mort Harris fights through the chaos. German fighters everywhere. Flak bursting in black puffs. The air filled with tracers and debris. Somehow they reach the target. Bomb bay doors open. Bombs away. Then the long flight home. Of 229 fortresses that reached Schweinfurt, 60 are shot down over the target. 17 more are lost on the return flight. 77 bombers gone. A 26.5% loss rate. 642 men dead out of 2,900 who flew the mission. 17 bombers are scrapped even after making it back to England. 121 more require major repairs. It's unsustainable. Mort Harris lands at 6:11 p.m. 9 little yanks and a jerk touches down safely despite its damage. Technical Sergeant Roberts, who prayed over Germany, survives. But across East Anglia that night, the bases are full of empty bunks. The next morning, talk of mutiny spreads openly. The 8th Air Force suspends deep penetration raids into Germany. For 4 months they will not fly again into the German heartland. The reason given is weather, and it's true that storms shut down operations through the winter. But the real reason is simpler. At this rate of loss, the bomber offensive cannot continue. General Arnold in his Pentagon office finally faces reality. The doctrine Hess championed, the bomber will always get through, has failed. The bombers cannot survive without long-range fighter escort, and the only fighter with the range to do the job is the one Hess been ignoring for a year. Arnold orders full production of the P-51 Mustang. Immediately. The factories respond. November 1943, 295 Mustangs. December 332 Mustangs. January 1944, 370 Mustangs. February 380 Mustangs. March 482 Mustangs. By August 1944, North Americans' factories are producing 700 Mustangs per month. The planes roll off assembly lines in Los Angeles and Dallas. They're flown across America by Wasp ferry pilots, women who often fly the fighters across the Atlantic themselves. When they land at English bases and pull off their leather helmets shaking out long hair, the men can't believe their eyes. The Mustangs cross the ocean on convoy ships crated in cargo holds, still dodging U-boat wolf packs. Help is coming. But it's November 1943. The Army Air Forces assigns them to the 9th Air Force for tactical ground support operations, not to the 8th Air Force for high-altitude bomber escort. Even now, the brass doesn't fully understand what they have. It will take one man, a hard-drinking, aggressive fighter pilot, to force the issue. December 1st, 1943. Boxted Airfield, England. Lieutenant Colonel Donald J. M. Blakesley steps out of a Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Hess, 6 feet tall, powerfully built, with blue eyes that never betray emotion, and dark wavy hair. At 26 years old, Hess already a legend. 130 combat missions with the RAF. A veteran of the Eagle squadrons. American volunteers who flew with the British before the U.S. entered the war. Has been temporarily assigned from his own 4th Fighter Group to the 354th Fighter Group here at Boxted. His mission: break in pilots on the new Merlin Mustangs. The P-51Bs arrived yesterday. Blakesley walks to the flight line where the new fighters are parked. Ground crews swarm over them, fueling, arming, preparing them for their first combat mission. He stops in front of one. The P-51B is beautiful. Sleek silver skin. Long nose, bubble canopy, clean lines. It looks fast sitting still. Blakesley has flown Spitfires with the RAF. Loved their nimble handling and speed. Hess been flying P-47 Thunderbolts with the 4th Fighter Group. Hated them. To him, the P-47 is a lumbering crate. Heavy. Can't climb. Short range. Hess watched month after month as the P-47s escort bombers to the German border, and then turned back, leaving the fortresses to be slaughtered. Hess hated that feeling. The helplessness of abandoning the bombers. Now he climbs into the P-51B's cockpit. The fit is snug but comfortable. Controls are well placed. Visibility through the bubble canopy is outstanding, far better than the P-47's. 650 caliber machine guns are buried in the wings. He starts the Merlin engine. It roars to life with a distinctive sound, smoother than the radial engine of the P-47. Blakesley takes off. For the next hour, he throws the Mustang around the sky. Dives, climbs, rolls, turns. Tests its limits. The handling is superb. Responsive. Balanced. It feels like an extension of his body. And it's fast. Faster than anything has ever flown. When he lands, his mind is made up. This is the greatest fighter aircraft has ever touched. Over the next 2 months, Blakesley leads the 354th Fighter Group on their first Mustang missions. The results are immediate and dramatic. January 4, 1944. Over Kiel, the 354th encounters 14 Messerschmitts. 14 German fighters destroyed. 0 American losses. January 11, 1944. Halberstadt and Oschersleben. Major James Howard, flying a P-51B, encounters German fighters attacking a formation of B-17s. For 30 minutes, Howard fights alone against an entire enemy squadron. Despite 3 of his guns jamming, he shoots down 6 German planes. 60 bombers are lost on that mission, but not one from the group Howard defended. For the first time, German pilots encounter American fighters deep inside. Mustangs, voices Tesh directly. "Give me those Mustangs, General." Kepner is sympathetic but firm. "We can't afford to stand down a fighter group for retraining. Not now. The offensive is at a critical stage." Blakesley doesn't back down. "General, most of these boys flew liquid-cooled engines for the RAF. It won't take them long. As for the mechanics, they worked on Spitfires when the group first started. They know these engines." Kepner hesitates. General Blakesley says, "Give me those Mustangs and I give you my word. You'll have them in combat in 24 hours. I promise. 24 hours. Kepner agrees. The Mustangs arrive at Debden, home of the 4th Fighter Group, on the night of February 27, 1944. The excitement is barely contained. Pilots and mechanics work through the night. "You couldn't tell enlisted men from pilots," one observer writes. "They were both doing the same thing, washing, gassing, and slipping the snaky 50 cal armor-piercing incendiaries into the wing guns." Blakesley tells his pilots, "Don't worry. You can learn to fly 'em on the way to the target." Normally, pilots get 200 hours of training on a new aircraft. The 4th gets 40 minutes. They don't care. They're trading mules for stallions. By spring 1944, the conversion accelerates. February. 3 groups have Mustangs. March 5 groups. April 7 groups. By September 1944, for conversion accelerates. February. 3 groups have Mustangs. March 5 groups. April. 7 groups. By September 1944, 14 of the 15 fighter groups in the 8th Air Force fly Mustangs. Only the 56th, whose commander prefers the P-47, retains Thunderbolts. 1,400 P-51s are based in England. The Mustang has become the fighting maw of the 8th Air Force. And in January 1944, a new commander arrives to lead them, General James H. Jimmy Doolittle, hero of the 1942 Tokyo raid. A true believer in the Mustang. Everything is finally in place. The Big B, the German capital, the first American fighter escort to the heart of the Reich, A-660 bombers, hundreds of fighters, led by Mustangs. This is the mission that will prove, or disprove, everything. Lieutenant John T. Godfrey, already an ace with 18 kills, briefs his section of the 4th Fighter Group. They'll fly high cover, sweeping ahead of the bomber stream looking for German fighters. The takeoff is routine. The formation assembles over England. Then they turn east. They cross the Dutch coast. Still no enemy contact. Over Germany, the Luftwaffe rises to meet them. But this time something is different. German pilots expect vulnerable bombers. Maybe a few short-range P-47s that will turn back. Instead, they encounter swarms of silver Mustangs. At 30,000 feet. Deep inside Germany. The shock is immediate. Godfrey spots a formation of Focke-Wulf Fe-190s attacking bombers. He dives, pulls in behind one. I started closing and gave him a short burst. Strikes on the starboard wing. The Fe-190 breaks away. Godfrey has to disengage. Several enemy fighters are on his tail. Minutes later, he finds a Me-109 head-on. Only one of his guns is working, but he presses the attack anyway. The Me-109 made 3 head-on attacks, and on the last one I managed to turn inside him and get on his tail. The dogfight descends to 500 feet. Treetop level. We were at the treetops and he tried to break down. I followed him down, firing one gun. The Messerschmitt's wing hits trees. The aircraft cartwheels, explodes. Lieutenant Archie Chatterley, also of the 4th, has his own wild fight. His section spots 6 Fe-190s attacking bombers. They engage. Immediately afterwards, I saw a 100 attacking a fort that had pulled out of formation. Chatterley dives on the Me-110, hits it with a burst. The twin-engine fighter breaks away smoking. Then he spots an F-190s attacking bombers. They engage. Immediately afterwards, I saw a 110 attacking a fort that had pulled out of formation. Chatterley dives on the Me-110, hits it with a burst. The twin-engine fighter breaks away smoking. Then he spots an F-190 doing such turns, never straightening out. The German pilot is trying desperately to shake him. Chatterley stays glued to his tail. Fires. The Fe-190 goes down. All across the sky, the same scene repeats. Mustangs engaging, dominating, destroying. Lieutenant Charles Gilpin, a navigator in a B-17 of the 381st Bomb Group, watches from his bomber. We had been over enemy territory about 45 minutes, when we were struck by about 75 FW-190s, Me-110s, Me-210s, and Ju U-88s. We fought them savagely for about 30 minutes. Then the Mustangs arrive. The P-51Bs lit out, pounding the flights of Nazi Furies, cutting them down, unleashing unbroken, long-awaited power. The 4th Fighter Group destroys 17 German aircraft that day. The mission continues. 660 bombers drop 626 tons of bombs on Berlin. 69 bombers are lost. Still a high number, but far better than the 26% loss rate at Schweinfurt. The Germans lose at least 66 fighters. 8-to-1 kill ratio in favor of the Americans. And for the first time, American fighters have escorted bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The psychological impact is devastating. For the German people, it's proof that nowhere in the Reich is safe. The Allies can reach any target they choose. For the Luftwaffe, it's the beginning of the end. And for one man in particular, it's a moment of crushing realization. March 6, 1944. Somewhere in Germany, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring watches the contrails overhead. American bombers. Escorted by fighters. Over Berlin. He can hardly believe it. Years later, at his interrogation in Nuremberg, Göring will explain, "The first time your bombers came over Hanover escorted by fighters, I began to be worried." He pauses. "When they came in with fighter escort over Berlin, I knew the jig was up. The jig was up." 3 words that encapsulate the collapse of German air superiority. Göring, who boasted in 1939 that enemy aircraft would never appear over Germany. Call me Meyer if they do. Now watches his prophecy crumble. The P-51 Mustang. The aircraft German pilots mocked in 1941 and 1942 as inadequate at altitude, has evolved into the weapon that will destroy the Luftwaffe, and the destruction is only beginning. Spring and summer 1944. The skies over Germany. The Mustangs are everywhere. No longer content to simply escort bombers, they go hunting. They strafe airfields, attack trains, destroy trucks and tanks, and always they engage German fighters. The kill ratios are staggering. In March 1944 alone, the 8th Air Force destroys more enemy aircraft than in all of 1942 and 1943 combined. Bomber loss rates plummet from 9.1% to 3.5%. Damaged aircraft drop from 45.6% to 29.9%. German pilots are being shot down like clay pigeons in a skeet shoot, one report notes. Major James Goodson, ace of the 4th Fighter Group, leads his squadron in a pitched battle over New Brandenburg. He spots a Me-109 entering the landing pattern at a German airfield. Suddenly I was catching up fast and I realized he was throttling back, entering the circuit to land. It also meant he didn't know I was lining up on him. Goodson waits until Hes less than 200 yards behind, then opens fire. The first burst scored hits all over him. I immediately pressed the trigger again. I was still hitting him when I had to stomp rudder and throw the stick forward and right to avoid ramming him. The Me-109 dives straight down, explodes on the ground. On the same mission, Goodson attacks one of the experimental Me-163 Comet rocket fighters on the ground. As he strafes it, anti-aircraft fire hits his aircraft. At the same moment, I felt the plane shudder. I heard the crump and smelled the explosive. I felt numbness in my right knee and knew I was hit. But it was the plane I felt for. She was like a stricken warhorse. Goodson nurses his damaged Mustang back to friendly territory. Crash lands. Survives. Lieutenant Wallace Lucky Loman of the 20th Fighter Group describes the Mustang's advantages: faster, more maneuverable. It was easier to fly. When it was supercharged with the Merlin 61 engine, then it became a real good airplane. The Mustang's superiority over German fighters is total. Faster than the Me-109 and FW-190, above 25,000 feet. Better dive characteristics than both. Tighter turning radius than the Me-109, 2,000-mile range with drop tanks, 650 caliber machine guns with 880 rounds. German pilots try everything. They develop tactics to force Mustang pilots to jettison their drop tanks early, hoping to limit their range. It doesn't work. The Mustangs simply have too much fuel. They send up their best aces, pilots with 200, even 300 kills. It doesn't matter. The Mustangs shoot them down too. June 20, 1944. Over northern Germany. The mission is to strike oil refineries at Pellets near the Baltic coast. Colonel Chester Hackett's B-24 Liberator is badly damaged. 2 engines dead. Losing altitude over enemy territory. At 15,000 feet, 2 Me-109s appear to finish them off. Hackett puts the crippled bomber into a steep dive, turning toward the attackers, splitting them apart. One crashes into the ground. He sees a grain field. At 300 feet, he lowers the landing gear and sets the Liberator down on German soil. There was very little wind, and we hit at a fast rate of speed. After rolling about 2,000 feet, we hit a ditch and snapped the nose wheel. The bomber stops. Out of nowhere, 2 P-51s appear overhead. They've shot down the second Me-109, the one Hackett saw crashing. The Mustangs have saved Hackett's life. He and his crew are captured, but they're alive. All across northern Germany that day, Mustangs dominate. Near Greifswald Bay, Captain O.T. Glass of the 4th engages 15 enemy fighters. We bounced about 15 plus Me and Heinz and FW-190s. The 109 I attacked was making a port turn, and I got on the inside firing all the while. Range was about 400 yards and I was closing. He must have seen me as he pulled up in almost a loop. I followed, firing, and observed good strikes on the right wing very close to the fuselage. As he started down from the top of his loop, he was trailing smoke, and was last seen going straight down. Lieutenant Charles Schilke's section attacks an airfield near New Brandenburg. Lieutenant Gillette made the first pass west to east firing on a Do-217. I followed and fired, then pulled up and away when I saw flak coming up from the buildings. His section destroys 1 Ju-88 and 3 Do-217s. The 4th Fighter Group racks up 15 kills that day. The statistics tell the story. In bitter October 1943, before the Mustangs arrived, bomber losses averaged 9.1% per mission. Nearly half of all aircraft returned damaged. By February 1944, losses dropped to 3.5%. Damage rates 29.9%. The Germans are losing 300 planes per week. They cannot replace them fast enough. More critically, they cannot replace the pilots. The Luftwaffe's barbaric system requires pilots to fly until they're killed or disabled. No rotation home after a set number of missions like the Americans. Just combat until death. Student pilots, barely trained boys, are being sent into combat. The Germans call it Kindermord. Infanticide. Experienced aces are dying faster than new pilots can be trained. One American pilot engaged in a dogfight with an Mi-109 watches the German pilot simply bail out without ever straightening his aircraft or attempting evasive maneuvers. The impression I got, he reports, was that the pilot, seeing 2 Mustangs after him, decided to get out while the getting was good. Even the elite German aces, men with 200 victories, are being shot down. Lieutenant Colonel Joe Peterbers of the 4th Fighter Group engages Walter Schuck, a Luftwaffe ace with 206 confirmed kills. Peterbers shoots him down. Years later, the 2 men meet and become friends. Mutual respect between warriors. But in 1944, respect doesn't stop bullets. The Luftwaffe is being decimated. Summer 1944. The collapse. Germany throws everything into the sky. New experimental aircraft, the Mi-262 jet fighter capable of 541 mph. The Mi-163 Comet rocket fighter even faster. Very technological marvels. The fastest aircraft in the world. But there are too few of them, and they arrive too late. On November 1, 1944, a P-51 shoots down a Mi-262 jet. On November 2, Colonel Robert Montgomery's 20th Fighter Group destroys 28 German aircraft in a single day, including jets and conventional fighters. On November 18, the 4th Fighter Group catches 12 Mi-262s parked on an airfield. They strafe them, destroying all 12 before they can take off. The Mustangs are faster than anything the Germans have except the jets. And the jets can't stay in the air long enough to make a difference. Nothing can stop the silver American fighters. By summer 1944, German fighter pilot training has collapsed. Where American pilots receive hundreds of hours of training before combat, German pilots are sent into battle with 20 or 30 hours. They don't stand a chance. A veteran American pilot describes the change. Some flew the 109 like it was a P-51. Then there was an FW-190 which outran my flight of 4. But hitting their oil was serious enough that pilot training was reduced drastically. During the period of March 2 to May 21 and 1942 and 1943 is dying. June 6, 1944. D-Day. When Allied forces storm the beaches of Normandy, Mustangs provide air cover overhead. The Luftwaffe attempts only token resistance. They've been swept from the skies. The invasion succeeds in part because of air superiority. Air superiority achieved by the P-51 Mustang. From D-Day through the end of the war, the strategic bombing campaign continues. Oil refineries, aircraft factories, transportation networks, all targeted, all destroyed. Germany's war machine is starved of resources, and overhead always the silver Mustangs fly. The final accounting. By war's end, 15,000 P-51s have been built. They've flown more than 200,000 missions, over 1 million combat hours. They've destroyed 950 German aircraft in air-to-air combat, another 4,000 on the ground, nearly 9,000 enemy aircraft destroyed, almost half of all German planes destroyed in Europe by American fighters. The 4th Fighter Group, Don Blaxley's group, finishes the war with 1,616 confirmed kills, the highest-scoring fighter group in the European theater. But the victory comes at a price. The 8th Air Force loses 26,000 aircrew during the war. 2,100 are fighter pilots. British losses are higher, 3,700 in fighters, 56,000 in bombers. German losses, 70,000 aircrew. Every mission brings the risk of death. Every sortie could be the last. But the Mustang saves countless lives. Without it, the bomber offensive would have failed. D-Day would have been impossible. The war might have dragged on for years. The orphan aircraft, dismissed, ignored, nearly cancelled, became the weapon that won the air war. Post-war, Nuremberg. The interrogators ask Luftwaffe pilots about the Mustang. Adolf Galland, commander of German fighter forces. The Mustang was the finest fighter aircraft of the war. Other German pilots agree. The P-51 was faster, had longer range and, critically, appeared in overwhelming numbers. We couldn't train pilots fast enough to replace our losses, one says. The psychological impact of seeing Mustangs over Berlin cannot be overstated. For Göring, it marked the moment he knew Germany would lose the war. For Hitler, it was a source of rage. He blamed the Luftwaffe for failing to stop the bombers. But the truth was simpler. The Allies had developed a weapon the Germans could not counter. The silver Mustangs ruled the skies. The people behind it. Edgar Schmude, the genius who designed the Mustang in 102 days, never received the recognition he deserved during his lifetime. After losing his wife in the car accident on the way to California, he buried his grief in work. His creation, the P-51, became his legacy. Schmude continued designing aircraft after the war, including the F-86 Sabre jet. He died in 1985 at age 89, knowing he had designed the greatest piston-engine fighter ever built. Ronnie Harker, the test pilot who matched the Merlin engine to the Mustang airframe, became known as the man who put the Merlin in the Mustang. His 30-minute test flight in April 1942 changed the course of the war. Harker continued test flying for Rolls-Royce after the war. He retired to New Zealand and died there in 1999, at age 90. He had his last flight in a Mustang in 1997, at 88 years old. Tommy Hitchcock, the crusader who fought bureaucracy to get the Mustang into production, didn't live to see his dream fully realized. On April 19, 1944, Hitchcock was testing a P-51 at an airfield in England when his aircraft crashed. He died instantly at age 44. He never saw the Berlin raid, never saw the Mustang sweep the Luftwaffe from the skies. But his persistence saved the program. Without Hitchcock's relentless advocacy, the P-51 might never have entered mass production. Don Blaxley, the apostle who brought the Mustang to the 8th Air Force, flew 1,000 combat hours, more than any other American fighter pilot in Europe. He survived the war and returned home a hero. General Hap Arnold, who resisted the Mustang for so long, finally admitted, privately, that had been wrong, but he never fully acknowledged the delay, never explained why it took so long to embrace the aircraft. Arnold suffered 4 heart attacks between 1943 and 1945, driven by the stress of running the air war. He became the first 5-star general of the Air Force in 1949. He died in 1950. Robert Lovett, the Undersecretary of War who forced Arnold's hand, understood better than anyone how close the program came to failure. The story of the P-51, he later said, came close to being the costliest mistake the Allies made during the war. But in the end, the right decision was made. Barely in time. The aircraft's fate. Mustangs continued to serve after VE Day. They were deployed to the Pacific, flying from Iwo Jima to escort B-29 Superfortress bombers on missions against Japan. During the Korean War, P-51s fought against MiG-15 jets and held their own. The Mustang remained competitive even in the jet age. After Korea, many P-51s were sold as surplus. They became popular racing aircraft. One reached speeds over 500 miles per hour, far faster than the original wartime models. Today, restored P-51s still fly. At air shows across America and Europe, the sound of the Merlin engine draws crowds. The Mustang has become an icon, a symbol of American ingenuity and determination. The fighter that won the air war. The lesson. The story of the P-51 Mustang is a cautionary tale about bureaucracy, ego, and institutional resistance to innovation. Not invented here syndrome nearly cost the Allies the war. American prejudice against British engineering. Wounded pride over the Allison engine. Commitment to a failed doctrine, the self-defending bomber. All of it conspired to delay the one weapon that could turn the tide. Thousands of young men died in the fall of 1943 because the Mustang wasn't there to protect them. But individual courage broke through the bureaucracy. Ronnie Harker seeing the potential in an afternoon test flight. Tommy Hitchcock barnstorming across America to make the case. Robert Lovett forcing the issue at the Pentagon. Don Blakesley demanding the aircraft for his men. Their persistence saved the program. The German mockery in 1941 and 1942 was understandable. The early Mustang with its Allison engine was inadequate at high altitude. But those who saw its potential, who understood what it could become with the right engine, changed history. From afterthought to war winner. From mocked to master. The transformation took just 18 months. 18 months from the first Merlin conversion to the Berlin raid. 18 months from German laughter to German defeat. By 1944, when Luftwaffe pilots looked up and saw silver Mustangs over Berlin, escorting bombers to the heart of the Reich, they understood. The war had turned. Goering was right. The jig was up. And the P-51 Mustang had written its name across the skies of Europe in the destruction of the Luftwaffe. The German pilots who'd laughed at the early Mustang in 1941 were right to laugh. But by March 1944, when those silver fighters appeared over Berlin at 30,000 feet faster than anything Germany could field, escorting bombers that would level their cities and factories, nobody was laughing anymore. The orphan aircraft, dismissed, ignored, nearly cancelled, had become the weapon that won the war. And the skies over Europe would never belong to Germany again.